All right. Welcome, guys. Welcome to another LightShare episode. Today we have another special guest, Andres Parada. He's a seasoned concept artist currently working in the entertainment industry and also part of the local 800 Art Directors Guild. And it's nice to finally be able to talk to you, man. Welcome
Thank,
to LightShare.
thank you.
Yeah,
Uh,
cool.
awesome. I just want to say I'm not seasoned at all, so I'll forgive that sin. But all right, I'm seasoned
Well,
in design. I'm seasoned in design, but not in concept art. So I'll talk.
uh,
I'll tell you more about it.
gotcha. Yeah, if you want to maybe talk a little bit about your past background, like how you got started and everything, and
Listen,
how
I
you
think
came
you are
to be
quite
here.
seasoned. I just, have your artwork rolling, in the like a layout that I made for this episode, so people can see
Okay.
your work being displayed on screen as we talk. And
Okay.
dude, you've got quite a lot of work
Yeah.
under your
No,
belt.
no, not at all. Okay, I'll tell you about it. I'm just faking it until I make it. So, did you grab it from my webpage or from ArtStation?
No, I just went to your art station.
Okay.
Did I do something wrong?
I'm so behind. No, 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 not at all. I'm just so behind in my ArtStation. I try to keep my webpage somewhat updated because most of the work I get is through my webpage and not ArtStation. But anyway, it's all good.
Oh,
It's all good.
okay. My bad. My
I'll
bad.
probably share some. No, 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 not at all. No worries at all. I'll share some of my maybe later and share some of my more recent work that I can show.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, just a little bit about me. You as you can hear, I have an accent. I'm not from the U.S. I was born and raised in Sweden, but I'm not very Swedish looking. My parents are from Chile, and they were political refugees in the 70s. They ended up in Sweden, and then I was born in the early 80s. So I lived in Sweden in a Chilean household. I lived in Sweden until I was 19. Then I moved to Spain, lived in Spain for a couple of years, went back to Sweden, and then moved to the US and pursued a degree in industrial design. And I didn't want to be a designer in the US. I wanted to study political science. I wanted to be a professor and teach political science in Sweden. But I met a girl in Spain, and she was studying in the US. So when I moved to the US, um, the US didn't accept my previous years of studies. And I felt, I have 3 years of studies here, and you're not going to take it. And I have really good grades, and blah, blah, blah. And they said no. So I had to start over again from the beginning. And I felt I was so old, and I was so behind. I was like 21 or 22, which is not old at all. But so she said, "Hey, what about this industrial design? That could be up your alley." And I said, "Well, I'll test it." Uh, and the deadline had already passed. And they said you have to show an entrance portfolio, and can you? But if you put something together for tomorrow, maybe we'll accept you. And all I had was graffiti pictures from my youth. From like I should have told you that too. I spent 4 or 5 years of my teenage years painting murals and other things, uh, and that was my creative outlet. So I only show them basically murals that I had done in Sweden and Spain and Italy, um, and some sketches. And they said, "Well, we see some talent there. We'll let you in." And I started studying industrial design. And I fell in love with it. I did that for 4 years and then spent a decade in Chicago consulting as an industrial designer, designing cell phones and computers and vehicles and interiors of restaurants, but mostly consumer electronics for Microsoft and Samsung, especially, but also BlackBerry back in the days. I don't even know if you remember the BlackBerry phones. They were they were the hot stuff before iPhone came to the market.
Yeah, they were
Um,
meant to be for the business guys, right?
Exactly, exactly. And I did design medical equipment and so forth. And I did that for 10 years until 2016, when my wife then, well, wife now, my girlfriend became my wife. But anyway, when 2016, she finished her studies in Chicago. She finished her PhD and she landed a job out here in California. So I thought, and I had seen conceptual artists online. I'd seen Feng Zhu stuff, of course, like everybody else. But I'd also seen, years ago, I'd seen some sketches by Doug Cheng that I thought was the coolest thing I've ever seen. Just black and white sketches. These classic old school, loose, industrial, it was some kind of robot underwater or whatever it was. And I thought it was the coolest thing I've ever seen by Doug
Most
Cheng.
likely on one layer. Right.
One layer and really quickly and done with his left hand while he's drinking coffee or something. I don't know. So when she was done, I said, I have one life, I'm gonna give this a shot. So I stopped working as an industrial designer and did a complete change to try to get into the world of conceptual art. This was 2016. We moved to California. I didn't know any conceptual artists at all. I didn't know anybody in the industry, and I'd left a high-paying six-figure job to basically not make any money. And I did that. I worked on my skills, and then 2 years later, I joined the Art Directors Guild, and it has been much, much easier since then. So really, so that's why I said season, not at all. I've been doing concept art since 2016, but I've been doing design in general professionally since 2007. But then I spent my youth also working as a painter and a muralist and an illustrator. So that's the really, really brief version of how I ended up in conceptual art.
So do you
Do you
feel
have any
like
of those murals? Oh, sorry.
No, that's fine. I was just gonna say that. Do you feel like all those things kind of add up to contribute in a way to your skill set nowadays?
Yes and no, absolutely. So for example, people say, oh, industrial design is such a good background for you, and I said, yeah, absolutely. But while I spent 8 hours a day designing things like this, others spent 12 hours a day designing monsters, right?
Yeah.
So even though all the technical understanding in the CAD and the 3D programs and so forth is a really, really good skill set to have, I still rather practice on drawing monsters to become a good creature artist than designing cell phones, right? But I really believe there's a lot of paths to Rome. And even though the traditional going to art center and taking the classes and getting to know the people and so forth might be the more secure path, there are other ways, and each path is unique, and some of them are long and some of them are short. And I feel my path to get to do what I finally want to do was a very, very long one. And I wish in another life that I could have done that when I was in my 20s, and I'm approaching 40 now, and I'm only 5 years in conceptual art. So while others are 23 and have the same amount of experience like me, you guys are young and you have already done so much, and I wish I could have done what you guys have done when I was in my mid-20s, but it wasn't the case. I wasn't living in the US, I wasn't this, and none of you except Dom, right? But so we all know that there's not a clear-cut path always, and that's okay, and I have to accept that. But I still recognize that I've had a lot of luck, and I've had and things have fallen my way to be able to do what I want to do. And truthfully, I've been really, really busy these last 3 years, and the Art Directors Guild has been really, really good to me, and meaning to be able to work in film and TV where I wanted to end up. So I can't complain, even though I wish I could have redone things. But yes, sorry, that was a very convoluted way of answering you, Adrian.
No, it's fine.
But
it's
yeah,
great.
I think that all of that helped. And I think though, and still I feel that some of like the years of me sketching letters and colors and the nights going out spray painting at locations where I shouldn't and so forth, have it led up to who I am today? 100%. 100%. And it's one of these things. I'm actually about to pick up mural painting again. I haven't done a mural for years, but I need to do it because I still feel it's such a need in me to have that outlet of painting large, expression, and painting large and free, and not being so tied to an end product that is a movie or a film or a game. And for me, that painting murals was the end product in itself, and that was very freeing and liberating. Art for art's sake. And then when somebody wanted to pay for it, fantastic. But if not, I was going to pay for it, buying spray cans and paint and everything else. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, pretty interesting perspective indeed.
Yeah.
So you feel kind of regretful, really, that you didn't do as other people when you were younger? Because I think that we all do that, right? I came to think that it's kind of pointless, you know? It's like, okay, everything I've done, everything that happened to me so far led me to this very moment right now. And perhaps regretting any of those things and being able to change something would perhaps entirely change the present, right? I don't know if for good or for bad, you know, but it will definitely be different. So I think I'm kind of scared, you know, what if we get to a point where we kind of regret, what was I doing when I was 10 years old? Why wasn't I studying, you know, this and that? It's like, there's a time and a place for everything, I think.
You're right. Yeah. I agree. Sorry, I don't want to be a mic hogger here, but no, I hear you and I agree.
It's your episode. You're the one who must speak.
No, but I want to hear all of your guys' perspective on this. But no, I hear you, and I think that's true. That everything that happens in life, in one way or another, influences us to be who we are. But I also think, what if I would have spent, instead of designing all these cell phones and these medical equipment and so forth, and doing things for companies that I really don't care about, and companies sometimes that I actually don't even support what they are doing, but it paid my bills, and I somehow in the industrial design field just felt like I was just a cog in the capitalist system of pumping in money to a company that produced plastic pieces of equipment that would end up in a landfill. And even though, they helped the person for a certain amount of time, I wanted to be a storyteller and I wanted to be a visual communicator. And I wasn't that. I was just a part of a system in a larger scheme to make somebody buy something for someone else that I didn't fully support. And by doing that, I made a good living for myself and my family. So maybe regret is not the right word, but I wish I could have done things differently. But I'm also a person that don't live in the past. Whatever happened. I still have another 40 years to live, I hope, another 50 years to live. Maybe not that much, maybe it's just another 10 years to live, but I'll do the best out of those years. So I never look back, or I do sometimes, but I don't live my life regretting what I haven't done. I rather do right now, you know, like I'm sick and tired of people my age saying, well, when I was 20, I could lift this and I could run this and I could do this. And my question is, but how far do you run now? How much do you lift right now? I don't care what you did then. What are you doing right now? Because we can all live in our past glory of when I was 20, I did this, and when I was 16, I was the fastest in my team. I think it's much more important what I can do now and what I can do in the future. And I try to live that way, but sometimes the ghosts of my past haunts me too. But Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't
I
dwell
mean,
on it too much, but if I could do it differently, I would have done it differently.
we can't help it, right? But to
Yeah,
fantasize about like changing things, we should have done different. You know, oh, if I said that instead of this, if I did so instead of that, right?
yeah,
But yeah, despite what I said, you know, I think this is something we all do sometimes. You know, we kind of imagine
Yeah.
and reimagine different case scenarios, like how different would this be now? You know, if I would have invested in that instead of that, you know, like I would not be
exactly.
here now. I would be somewhere else.
Yeah.
Or yeah. But I mean, it's
Yeah.
interesting how we come to understand how important it is to be grateful for this very moment right now, our present at this moment,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, one thing that I'm wondering about is like you're the second guy that I mean, previously it was a girl, but the second person going from industrial design to entertainment design that we talked to, and like, I mean, you mentioned a little bit about feeling like a cog in a machine,
Hmm.
but what exactly do you think it's the charm of the entertainment industry when you are working with industrial design, which like for me it's particularly interesting the fact that your products like they become actual products, you know? That's like super cool looking from a distance. But
Mm.
like I imagine that on the other side must be some sort of the same feeling, you know, like people look over the other industry and like, oh, that's so cool. And because it's so close one thing to another, right? In terms of how we work.
That's a great question. I think the joy for all of us is that we get something tangible out of our ideas, right? We have ideas, we dream big, and something tangible comes out. Whether it's whether it's this book, right? That is
Whoa.
tangible, right? Whether it's that, or whether it's a movie, or whether it's like, I'll show you something. Hold on one second.
Okay. Damn, bro, you got your book.
Yeah.
I know the guy
So
who
Oh,
made that
yeah.
cool.
book.
So,
So
so one
cool.
of the very first one of the very first products I worked on was this shoe, and I still have it on in my studio because it did something for me, right? It's
Mhm.
um, and as a youth, having a sketch on a paper and then go out at night and then paint all night and be careful and so forth, and then in the morning there's this big mural there, and then my friends, neighborhood friends, hey, I saw your mural, you know, and as I'm going by the subway and being able to see it, and I was like, feel like the king of the world. Nobody else cared except me and my five friends and a couple of more, right? But having that tangible thing, I think it's important for all of us that we, from the
Yeah.
idea that uh, something happens, and in industrial design you see that quite a bit. Um, but I was more important. I've always been intrigued by stories, um, and part of it had to do with growing up in a refugee family. We didn't have much money, of course, but I also grew up in a very politically active family. We were refugees due to my parents' political opinions. So their story and my father being imprisoned, tortured in prison in Chile, and so forth, um, created this sense of me of right and wrong, and also of good and evil. And when I read stories, when I read Dune or Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit or so forth, it created these stories that I could draw parallels to what was happening.
Yeah,
Read mythology. Go
you
ahead.
saw the reflection, right?
Absolutely, and you could
Hmm.
draw parallel. Like for example, reading Dune and the houses, so the different houses. I could see, well, this is like the U.S. and Soviet, and they're fighting about the oil, right? But instead of oil, it's the spice and so forth. And you could draw those parallels and stories, and what stories could mean for different people meant a lot for me. Star Wars was that way too. This little rebellion that is fighting against the big empire, and the empire is trying to make people do things that they shouldn't, and so forth. And I could see that rebellion story in so many different countries and so many different times throughout
Yeah.
history. Whether it was, the
There's like a quote, right?
whether
Like no, stories tell lies that no, stories are lies that tell a deeper truth or something like that. You know, they kind of
absolutely,
reflect our world depending on the author's understanding of it, I guess, the perspective.
100%, right? And we can interpret different things from it. And absolutely, and so it becomes a bigger truth in many sense, even though the story isn't true. The story about the tricksters that exist in most mythologies, the Lokis or the tricksters, that isn't a true story, yet in almost every society or a larger picture of life, there has been a trickster character that
You can see
messes
the
up things.
equivalent. Yeah.
Exactly. So even though Loki is not a real character, the truth of what he tells is so true in so many different stories. And that intrigued me, and I wanted to tell those stories, and I wanted to make those stories, and I haven't gotten to it the way I want to, and I'm working on it slowly, eventually between my paying jobs and so forth. But I want to tell my stories just like Dom, right? And just like all of you. I know all of you work on IPs, and I want to pick your guys' brain about it. But
For sure.
but that filled me when I was doing industrial design. I did that for 10 to 12 hours a day, and then I went home, and when everybody went to bed, I worked on my own little stories and tried to, and that's why eventually I was like, what am I doing here? I just need to drop this and really give it a chance and see if I can make it as a concept artist. And it was scary, but I'm so happy that I did, and it's so fulfilling now to make a living, and frankly now make a good living from doing what I wanted to do, and instead of just doing this tangible piece that is great and is good, but it's not as fulfilling for me as telling a story and making people dream big or think big or be affected by it in a different way than what a product does. Sorry, does that answer your question, Andre?
I mean, it more than does.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Yeah, because oftentimes, like in this industry, we're sort of, we follow the directions and we do the tasks and things like that. But
So it's funny, right? Because sorry, you get into this industry because you're passionate about art and stuff, and it ends up being a job, like work. Oh, I gotta work. Shouldn't be like that, right? Should be like
No.
I think I'm trying to kind of express in words, and I'm sorry that I cut you, Dom, but kind of like comparing what you say about like working on your own stuff like you're doing right now, like when you switched from designing those objects, that I guess I'm interpreting now that it felt more like work, right? To now having a more meaningful experience at expressing yourself, even though it's like for someone else, right? Now imagine the next step where you kind of express yourself like the way you were doing it when you were painting those murals, right? Like
Dom, I'll let you say what you were going to say, and then I have my comments about that.
Sorry again, Dom.
Yeah, I was saying, like, in the work field or the industry, we're told to like do what the art director is telling us to do, but then outside we have like more of that creative freedom. On our personal projects, we can really be more expressive with whatever art styles we want to go into and things like that. And I think, that's fulfilling for a lot of artists, I feel. And I'm sure like you're getting into that. I know you did the legacy project. That was really cool a couple of months ago, or last year, I think, right?
Yeah, I'm still working on it, and it's going to be a book. I have done much more, but it's gonna get there. It's just that I work on it in between, and the truth is that I've had a really good last 2 years. I've been just busy, so I still work on it a little bit every week, but I haven't put out much, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say about that, though, I think it's important too, though, to, even though we have our passion projects and the things we want to do on our own, to how can we translate that passion into a client's project? Because as passionate as we are about our own project, somebody else is about whatever they are doing. And when I'm being paid, and if I'm charging what I'm charging, they deserve to get 12 hours of me that is as passionate about that project as they are about it, as I am about my own project when I'm working on that. So I think part of our job as conceptual artists is to bring that passion that we have for our own things to our clients. And that can be tough, if I'm not super passionate about what they're doing.
Yeah.
But I think that comes with the territory, and I try to treat every job I have. If I commit to the job, whether it's a 1 week job or a 3 month job, and normally in the film and TV industry, my jobs are rarely longer than 6 or 7 months. But I've had some that are just a week or two. Even if it's just for a week or two, for that week or two, that project is the most important thing for me ever. Even if I don't fully care about that. Because I think that's how they will get the best out of me. And also, if they get the best out of me, they will call me again for the next time they do it. So I think, and how do we do that? I don't know, but I think most stories, even even Cinderella or the La Caperucita Roja. What do you say? How do you say
Yeah,
that?
the red cape. I've never said that in English, so I don't really know. You know the story of this
girl,
girl,
something like that, right?
yeah, with the wolf.
The girl in red with the wolf. What's that story in English? Red Riding. Red Riding.
Yeah.
Red Riding Hood. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Or Hans and Gretel, whatever that story. If we go in depth to each one of those, all of those could be really, really cool stories. So I think most things we can do. We can learn to see some positive in that and try to really be excited about it and do our best. I think our employers deserve that, and we do us a disfavor if we don't put in the same effort to that as we do to our own projects.
Right.
So true. Like it's contagious, at a point.
Yeah.
Like that enthusiasm that you put into your work, it must at some point kind of spill over the rest of the team somehow, right? Because most of the time
Absolutely.
it's mostly about the numbers, it's mostly about this deadline. They kind of forget about the essence of the project. So that's when it becomes work, that I say, because most of the time what we do doesn't feel like work.
Yeah.
Right?
True. Yeah.
It's like it's what we like to do.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's when some people kind of try to take advantage of that. Isn't that what you like? Come on, just do it for free,
Exactly. True. And it is. I mean, it's one of these things we would do even if we weren't paid. But we have spent so many hours at it, so we should be paid well for what we do. So, but it is. I mean, we're lucky to work in the field that we're lucky to work in something that is so fun. I promise, I wake up Monday mornings and I'm excited to check in with my production designer or my art director and say, so what's the task this week? What's the task today? I'm not, I don't hate Mondays, reverse. I think Mondays are exciting. I think work is exciting, and I always recommend people, I always recommend even my kids, look for a job that you can see yourself doing a lot, because you will be doing it a lot.
And don't get good at something you hate, right?
Exactly. And worry less about the money, worry more about being fulfilled, and the money eventually will come. I really think so. I can't imagine something worse than being an accountant, cranking numbers all day, even if I would be paid much more than what I'm now. I don't know how much they make, but let's say that they make much more. I still would not feel fulfilled, I think, if I'm just waiting for the clock to time out, to the clock to run out. I don't do that today. So, yeah, I have boring days at work too at times, but most of the days are real exciting and fun.
And how usually, when we talk about jobs in the film industry, because, from what I've learned so far, I have never had the opportunity to work or contribute to any film industry project, but I've heard, thank you. I hope one day.
For sure. I promise you will. You will. If that's what you want, you will.
I've heard people, I have friends who've been working in films and stuff, and from their experience, I've heard that it takes, they're different from video games in terms of like the length of the the time you spend on the project is like shorter. You know, films are faster. Is that correct? Is that true? Like, what's
Yeah. So here, again, take everything I say with a grain of salt, because my experience isn't super deep. I've only done some games. My experience is mostly in TV and film. I've only done some games. I did some on Returnal that just came out earlier this year. That was actually my first concept art gig. One of my first concept art gigs when I started when I left the industry and started when I left industrial design and went into this. Um, and I've done a few things here and there. But yeah, the pace in film and TV is very, very fast. And that is and I think that is maybe what's most tricky. It's not uncommon. So can I share my screen?
Yeah, sure.
And is that okay? And I'll show you some things.
Yeah.
How do I do that? Screens. Okay, I'll open up here, and I'm not trying to be.
There should be two tabs, right? One for sharing like an application, like a window in particular, or the entire screen. You can choose.
Yeah, I'll share the whole screen.
Okay.
Tell me when you see my screen.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So, and I'm not trying to be self-promoting or anything. I'm just going to show you an example.
It's okay, man. You're here to do that. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, it's not uncommon so this show came out a few weeks ago. It's not uncommon for a piece like this or any of these that you spend, that they ask you 9 a.m, hey, we need something for after lunch, and you have to produce an image like this, 4 or 5 hours, and then maybe you they give you some feedback, and you spend another 1 to 2 hours, and painting a day is quite common. Sometimes 2 paintings a day. There are times when it's more complicated sets, like in this show, almost none of these were.
But is it that spontaneous? Like, hey,
no, well,
we need this for by lunch today.
It can be.
Okay.
So there are many times that we know, for example, hey, we're building this in this show. This show is about a sinkhole that happens in LA, and they go back in time, and a bunch of buildings from LA fall into the sinkhole. So we know that ahead of time. But the production designers in the film world, the one you report to is usually a production designer who is in charge of the art department. Everything from set building to set decoration, to the graphics, to everything that has to do with visuals that isn't the actors. It's basically the production designer that you report to. So it's not uncommon for the production designer to meet with the producers or the director and say, hey, we need something really quick about this. But often you have general guidelines that, hey, these first few days we're working on this, then we're working on this, then we're working on this. But script changes happens all the time. And because we're working so early in the process, most of the work I do is pre-production, which is all the work that needs to be done before the filming. So we kind of know what needs to be done, but if there's a script change and they need to do something quickly for somebody else to see it and allow the budget for it so that we can start building it because X, Y, and Z. So not everything is that way, but it many times happens that you need something quickly. Yes. Okay. It's very, I think my experience with games is that it's much more like games is much more like a slow cooker versus film world is much more like a pressure cooker. And there are good things and bad things with both, right? With a slow cooker, you can really, really work on the flavors and the moods and the visuals and so forth. But you have to wait 4 or 5 years for that game to eventually come out, right? While film is usually just 2 years, sometimes 3 years. Some things I worked on that are still not out that I worked on 4 years ago. But it also happens that I'm working on something earlier this year that will come out next year. So I feel that the film world is much more fast. But what I was going to come back to, that an image like this, maybe I spend a little bit more time because there's an action sequence and I think about this and we want to show the layers of the
Like
sinkhole and so
specific poses and stuff, right?
Keyframes, yeah.
Mhm.
We call it keyframes when it needs to tell you the story of an action sequence that happens that also tells us, that also shows us some design of what it's both like, it's almost like a refined storyboard, right?
Yeah.
It's an action sequence, but that also tells us some of the design. So that maybe takes a little bit longer, but it's very common. So here, for example, these where do I have them? Sorry, there's some burning cars. This I had to do a bunch of different burning car images that all took maybe in between 3 to 5 hours per piece, right? So just gathered a few hours of just a bunch of cars, threw them in different compositions, and then send it in moods. Use a lot of photos. That's why we use a lot of photos, and I know many people get tired of it, but it's the fastest way many times. So I rarely
Because you're
really
cheating, bro.
spend that too, but I rarely spend a long time building complicated 3D assets and then work on. Sometimes it happens, and I know some people in the film world do that, but for sure. But I usually spend 20% of my time on the 3D to just give me some blocks and then paint on top of that. Others are much more 3D heavy, and I think it just depends on what pipeline and what's the easiest. People rarely ask me for. My experience is that my production designer usually just care about the results, and how I get there, it's up to me. But if the 3D can get me 80% there, and I spend 20% of the time on it, perfect. Others spend almost all the time on the 3D and just render it in Blender and then add a few touches, and that works too, of course. But my point with just showing some of these is that it goes pretty quick. While in games, I felt that I could spend a little bit more time. I'll stop sharing my screen if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. No problem.
How do I stop that?
There should be a red
it should be
button.
like a exactly.
On the center bottom, like
Center
stop
bottom.
what?
All right, doesn't matter. Okay. What was I saying? I lost track. Just that I guess I was trying to say that sometimes it goes really fast. There are pieces that I've worked on for a longer time where all the details needed to get done. Actually, I'll show you an example of that too. Can you still see my screen?
Yep.
Yep.
There's on this show, the American Horror Story, that also finished recently. So these pieces are much more detailed, and I actually worked on these images for a couple of days per piece, and we rechanged all the chairs and the layouts and the beams and the colors and the floor and so forth. Why? Because eventually they actually build these large set pieces. So it's worth for them to have me spend a few days so that everybody, producers, directors, and so forth, everybody up the rank can approve of it before they spend $300,000 on building this restaurant. So it's worth for them to spend a few days for me to really flesh out and everybody be aligned. And then when you see, I have some photos of it somewhere, I think. This is the set, or this is the restaurant right there. Do I have another one? No, I just have that photo. But this restaurant is on almost every episode, so they really want to correct. And it's a large set piece that they build inside these studios. So there are times when we spend a few days on something, but much of it is fast.
So
my limited experience.
I got a question. So, for instance, when you work for video games, right, everything's meant to be virtual. So it ends up somehow mashed up together. It doesn't have to be practical. You know, nobody has to wear it. Nobody has to be physically there. But in movies where that actually does happen, I wonder if you get some sort of like indications about the scale, the size of the objects you have to build and stuff like that, because it's meant for, to be practical for actors to be in there. I can't come up with any particular example right now, but I'm seeing this kind of environment that you build here. Do they kind of give you some directions on how long this hall should be, this room, how high, how tall should be? Or I don't know.
Very good question. Yeah. So in movies and TV, you either they either scout a location that already exists and then set dress that, or if they don't have a location that match what they want, they build it inside these studios. Inside these big, I don't know how big I would say that they are, but maybe 300 meters by 200 meters. So 300 yards by 200 yards. Big buildings that you can build a lot of different sets inside.
Whoa.
And so if you're
That's a huge
in one of these studios, we built both the restaurant and the interior of this house. Because, for example, we scouted this house in Provincetown in Boston, but we couldn't use the interior of the house. It didn't match what we want. So we had to rebuild the interior of the house, plus that we didn't want to, it was done in the middle of COVID, so we didn't want to need to fly all the actors out to Provincetown so that they could do most of the acting in LA. We rebuilt the interior of the house in a sound studio in LA, but all the exterior shots were done in location. So sometimes you find locations that matches what you want and you reset that, or you redress that, or if it's a destroyed building and the building isn't destroyed at the time, you reset it, you build sets around it to make it look destroyed. But if you don't have what you need, you build that on a soundstage. And yes, you always get that. And you work together with something called a set designer who actually makes the blueprints. I mean, if we're building this restaurant, I don't know how to build a blueprint for a restaurant. I just know how to visualize it. So you work closely with a set designer that sometimes gives you the hola perrito, beautiful dog.
Thanks.
So the set designer is the one that builds the blueprints in whatever program they have, and they send it to a construction team, and then the construction team build these things really, really fast comparatively. And they, for example, these big, large wood beams is just fake wood beams. It's just thin slices of wood because that's much cheaper. So it's hollow in the middle, but in reality, you would have these large, big chunks, right? So it's all these stones, for example. It's fake stones that make it look like stone. Everything to make it as cheap as possible and build it as fast as possible.
Full of tricks, right? All around.
Exactly. But much of that I don't know about. So you work closely with a set designer, or sometimes the production designer deals with them and you deal with you separately. Each production does it differently. But I've had it many, many times where I'm working back and forth with the set designer. They send me blueprints, I use them, or they send me a model because it has to be this small or this big, or we can't fit this, or we have to do this without the second floor, and so forth. So you have to learn their language and understand what they do and work cohesively with them.
So they just give you like a 3D block out maybe, and then you
Or at times I give them a 3D block out. I make my designs, I make a 3D block out, and I send that to them, and then they take that, they swear a little because it's garbage according to them, right? And then they rebuild it in something that it can actually be built by a construction team. I'm joking, I'm saying that tongue in cheek because we all appreciate each other, but they wish that I could do it the way they do it, obviously, and I wish they could send me better models, but anyway. Yeah. So it's a very collaborative process, and I really appreciate the magic that they bring to the scenes, or the graphic designers, the magic they do, and everybody has their strengths that they bring to the production, so that eventually we get the movies and the shows that we want to see.
So, have you ever art directed a group of concept artists in your experience? Or
No, I haven't. I never art directed, and hopefully one day I want to do it. But I'm happy to take direction from other people, and I'll be happy to direct when somebody deems me good enough to direct. But I'm in no rush, And the funny thing is that most production designers I work with and most art directors, when I turn something in and they say, "Oh, it's good, but what about this and this and this?" And I was like, "Oh, but," and I disagree many times, and I follow their direction, and it turns out better. So I appreciate an art director, and I appreciate a production designer, and I think us as concept artists need to be humble enough to see that other people, even though they don't have the skills we have an eye many times for what is good and what isn't. And it has happened so many times where I think it's good enough, or where I think this is what it needs to be, and they have an eye for that it could be better, and it does turn out better. There have been times too when an art director tells me something and I think that it didn't turn out as good. But that's okay too. Everybody can fail at what they do at times. But no, I have never art directed. I hope to do it one day. But I think I'm in no rush. I'm doing my best to be the very best I can at what I do, and to be as fast as I can at what I do, so that eventually I can. But again, most important thing for me is to produce quality for whoever hires me, so that they want me to work for them again. And if I keep doing that over and over again, I'm sure that it will go fine.
Sure.
I've seen
Yeah, I
you.
think you touched on a very important point there about being humble. I feel like, despite the fact that you said, "Oh, I wish I've done this earlier," I see a lot of the younger people, because I think they learn like how to be good with art so fast. I see I mean, I don't want to generalize, but I see a lot of the times they don't take feedback as well as some older people that are used to like
True.
having other people pointing like what they want and like what's
Yeah.
wrong or not, or that kind of thing, where, I mean, I don't have I am excited about the work, but I don't have any personal attachments to the sense like I can take the feedback and apply it and see what the point is. And I think that balance of like, I love it enough to care about it, but like not enough to be personal about any feedback that I take. I think that's a weird balance to strike.
Yeah, and I think it's twofolded, right? I have to know that I don't call the shots until I'm the production designer. I don't call the shots, and if I ever become a production designer, it's still somebody that I report to, the director, and even the director reports to the producer, and even the producer reports to the CEO of Disney or the CEO of Warner Brothers or wherever, right? So there's always somebody ahead of you, or somebody that signs the check. So we have to learn to take direction, but we also have to learn to voice our opinion in a professional way, in a mature way, and say, "Hey, what about this? Can we do it this?" But we have to know who calls the shots, and that's a fine balance to learn. I'm not saying that we should just turn our heads down and accept everything, but we should know who is calling the shots, and we should always be allowed to share our opinion and share our voices, but know what you don't know is as important as knowing what you know. And the older I get, the more I realize that I know so little. So I'll do the things I know as good as I can, and while I'm doing it, I'm trying to learn more. But yeah, being able to take direction is highly, highly important, however old you are, right? At the same time, I will still have that fight the power attitude in me all the time, right? This executive has never been here and never done this. How could they know, right? but yeah. So I think it's that balance. I'm bloviating here a little bit, guys. I'm sorry. I'm repeating myself over and over, and so I apologize about that.
That's great, man.
No worries.
Yeah, I think that's so true. You know, the more you learn, you know, the more you understand, the more you realize, and the more you acknowledge. And I think what Andres said is like I think it's a matter of awareness, an awareness that is only developed through experience.
Yeah.
It's that simple, I think. You need to walk that far, you know, to realize.
Yeah. And not to tie it full circle, but to bring it back to, I think my decade of industrial design helped in the sense of being professional that way, of learning that all the things of many times I think art school teaches us skills really well, but they don't teach us how to be a businessman. And unfortunately for all of us, half the deal is being a businessman, being a promoter, being a marketing guy, being an accountant, doing
Oh, yeah.
invoices,
Wearing all the
of these
hats.
things, all these hats, right? And
Yeah.
I'm not good at it. I feel that I'm good at one thing a little bit, but invoicing or social media, or like, oh, I haven't posted anything, I haven't updated my art station for 4 months, like all of those things I'm awful at. So and I wish art school taught you more of those than just one quick class on how to do invoices. Have invoices on time, be professional, how you answer your emails, how often, how you check in, all those things. And or understanding what overhead is, how you cut overhead, how do you simplify, how do you keep a good track of bookkeeping, all of those things. That I feel that I learned a lot from in my decade as an industrial designer, that I was able to bring into the concept art field, uh, and that has been beneficial. But it's something that we naturally, as being artists and designers, don't necessarily know, and it even sometimes push away to the side. And in the beginning, I remember I had clients that said, "Hey, you haven't invoiced me for 2 months." I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I better do that, right?" So I was so focused on getting the work done and not focused on having
Yeah.
money coming. So so it's we have to be well balanced, and it's the continuous struggle that I know you guys have talked about previously and other podcasts and so forth, of that well balance, not only by being an artist and being a businessman, but also moving your body and keeping yourself in shape and doing things outside of art and having a social life and all of those things that we all
Everything at
struggle with,
once.
right? Because our
Yeah.
best friend becomes our computer and our friends online and our art
Mhm.
books and so forth. So,
Yeah.
and Andre laughs because he knows it's not because it's funny, because it's true.
Mhm.
Exactly.
It's so true, indeed.
Yeah.
But I
'Cause you
think
kind
you know,
of.
it doesn't
Oh,
matter
sorry.
how good you get at anything. You know? Yeah. Sorry, Dom.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, yeah, as a digital artist, you're kind of sitting at your computer for like hours a day. You start to realize over time, it's like, this is my life. It's at a desk for,
Hmm.
however many hours. And it's like, do I have a social life outside of this? Like, oh, maybe I should probably go tend to that too and spend time with family and stuff. And that's what I started to realize, like, over the years of doing art, is like, you know, I haven't seen my friends in a while. I should probably like go talk to them sometimes too.
I
Like,
agree. I agree.
yeah,
And it's
but
it's that one of the many things I've slacked in. It's just my social outlet. I try to physically keep myself in shape. I try to run, and I was running daily for a year and a half. Now I'm going to the gym daily and run a couple of times a week. But I try to physically break a sweat every day and so forth, because we're sitting, as you said, we're sitting 10, 12, sometimes 14 hours a day in front of a computer. But having a balanced life is important. Having interests outside of concept art is important. Having things we care about. I still care about politics a lot. I listen to political podcasts all the time. I care about history tons. I think history is fascinating. I'm a science nerd. Um, there's so many interests that I try to listen to as I'm working, because to be a more well-rounded person.
You try to understand the world.
Exactly.
Just want to make sense of it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I actually feel like that adds up to the work. Like, it makes your work better because you understand more about the world instead of like that same old like concept art that we see all the time. Because the people like consume concept art and then produce concept art and they consume like what other people are producing, consuming it again. And I feel like when you meet someone or like a great artist, usually they are more well-rounded and they look like outside of the industry for inspiration and for like knowledge and that kind of stuff, you know?
Yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, it's probably fine, you know, to look at other people's productions, right, and creations, but I find it, I don't know what the word is, more pure, more accurate, I guess, to look at what inspired Star Wars, what inspired The Lord of the Rings, you know, like the real references. And surprise, it's nature, it's out there, it exists, you know, it's real stuff. It's probably a mixture of fictional stuff that they've seen somewhere else and real life experiences. And it's like, think of rap songs and stuff like that, you know, these people are putting their lives, their life experiences into words, and they're making music out of it. Other people are writing, I don't know, poems, books, novels. They're making movies based on real facts, based on the story of this and that, you know, based on history. I don't know. It's like all around us. And the thing is that, you know, what everything you've been saying about like, you know, I got to learn how to do everything because I like to paint and do my stuff, but then I have to take care of the you know, the bills and the, you know, the invoices and all the business stuff, right? I think it doesn't matter how good you get at something. That top of that mountain that you're climbing, it always gets higher. You know, the more you climb, the higher it gets for some reason. It's like it's never enough. No. So when do we get to that point where it's like, okay, that's enough? You know, I don't think that's something when you have this goal in mind that doesn't seem to have an end. You know, it's like so abstract. Like, I want to be a good artist. Like, what defines that? You know, what are the standards? The industry you're working in, or your own standards? Like, I don't know. I don't know what size this has. You know.
Yeah. And that's okay. I think we also, I 100% agree with you, and we also need to learn to enjoy the run. And what I mean with that, so we have to learn to not only enjoy getting into the goal after the marathon run, but the run itself, the sweat itself, the grind itself. Yes. And there's a beauty to that. I earlier
what do
this
you
year,
mean? How can you like that? It's awful. You know, it feels so bad.
Exactly.
I know.
And there's earlier this year I ran a double marathon.
Whoa.
And I hold on. It sounds worse than what it was. It's a double marathon, but that you basically run. You guys know David Goggins. I know you guys have discussed him before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But he had this challenge that you run a double marathon in 2 days, and basically every 4 hours you run 7 kilometers, which is 4 miles. Every 4 hours you run 4 miles, then you stop, you rest for 2.5 hours, then you run 4 miles again, you rest 2.5 hours, you run 4 miles again. You do that for 48 hours, and all, if you add it up, it's 2 marathons. Okay. And you think, oh, that rest will be fine, no problem at all. That rest, I know it would have been easier if I ran half a marathon, rested, half a marathon, rested, half a marathon, because the act of stopping and running and stopping and running actually adds to the difficulty of it.
Dude, I love that you're saying this. It's exactly how I feel all the time. I have friends kind of, highlighting this because it's like, oh no, Adrian never wants to stop, like, because I'm like, if I stop, dude, I'm not going to run again. I'm staying here. So it doesn't matter how long we run. If I stop, I stop. There's no way I'm turning back on.
And his point is just that. That's why the challenge is you have to run and you have to stop, Then
Yeah.
you have to rest that time, and then you run again, and then 2 times no problem, 3 times start getting hard, 4 times getting hard. Then you still have another 8 times of doing it. So doing it 12 times, 7 kilometers, the act of stopping and then switch your mind, and now I'm doing it again. So my point with all of this story is learning to enjoy the process, learning to enjoy the grind. I'm so tired right now, I can't do it. Put on your shoes, start doing it step by step by step, is as important as when you're done. And I think for all of us is that, I wish I could draw robots the way Aaron Beck does it, or I wish I could build 3D the way Vitaly does it, but the grind of becoming great is also enjoyable, and we have to sometimes look and say, okay, I've come this far. I'm not good at this, I'm not good at this, and I'm not good at this, but I am good at this, and that's okay. And now I'm gonna learn to be good at this, and that's okay if I'm not great at it right away. And none of us ever will get to the highest mountain ever, because then there's another mountain, another.
There's always a higher one, right? Yeah.
Yes. And that's beautiful. I think that's beautiful. That's not bad. And the ones that are the best in the world at what they do are the best in the world at what they do, but they're not the best in the world at this other thing. And that's okay too, right? And to learn to appreciate also what you can do and see, because you know the grind, and you know the process, and the slow run of getting there for each person, and that's there's a beauty in that
there's a
always
place and a time for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
It relates a lot to personal projects too, like when you have to keep making more ideas for the project. Like for me, it's like hard to stop because I want to keep going, until it finishes eventually, and then I move on to the next project after it's done. So I think there's like a gratification of, like you said, enjoying the process of building it, things like that. So
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's hard to call it quits too, right? All of us. How many of you are sitting on pieces that you don't want to push out yet because you feel that I can do some more and some more? And sometimes you just have to call it done, even though it could.
Yeah. And I can wait a little longer until I get better, so I can complete this very good idea that I had, And that never happens.
Never happens. And working in the film and TV industry is a crash course in that, because it's done. You have to move on.
Exactly.
And then when you finally
I love that.
put these things up on internet, they're like, I don't want to put this out and people to see, and they will think, well, this is not that good, but I only had a day to do it. And, like you start giving yourself excuses.
Yeah.
And it's okay if it's not the greatest. And if it isn't great, don't put it out. That's okay. But I want to show that I did this and this. I worked on this movie on Cruella that came out earlier. And you want to, I can't show my works yet, but I will soon. But anyway, you want to show what I was going to say. You want to show what you have done, but you also want to say, but they were so rushed, and we only had this time, and like almost as excuses for why it isn't as advanced as you wish it was. It doesn't matter. It's okay. It's okay. And I think letting go of things, I guess that's what I'm trying to get to. Letting go of things and moving on. It's a skill to learn. I haven't learned it yet. And be okay with that things are done, even if they could be improved on.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. Same here, man. I think we all have like a hard time letting go.
Yeah.
Like saying, okay, this is done. This piece is done. Because I mean, that moment never comes because you never get that good. Yeah. As good as you expect it to get, because you're always improving. So you're naturally always making more steps. And there's got to be a time where you say, okay, this is done.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
That's
think
why you gotta post it
most,
like as quickly as you think it's done. So then
yeah,
like you have
You
no
don't
way
dwell on
back.
it. Yeah.
And then you look
look,
at it the next day and it's like, oh, I could have fixed it, but it's already there. So
Yeah. It's fine.
so I
Yeah,
like
just
the
let it
way
go.
of looking at this as like an abandoned piece, you know, because it's like you could be working on it forever, constantly improving it, adding more details, correcting this, correcting that. But there's a point where you say, okay, this is over, you know,
Yeah.
this one is finished.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's a great point.
For sure. For sure. For sure.
Yeah, I was just thinking, you know, you mentioned some 3D stuff because when you see these kind of images, you usually think, especially since you mentioned the usage of like pictures and photography and stuff, you think, oh, this is just made with images and paint over, but you mentioned 3D, so I mean, to me, you know, 3D seems quite a daunting thing to dive into, and I'm still learning. But I would
Yeah.
like to get to the point, as I see many references out there, you know, many other people that I follow that have this ease, you know, to use any 3D program and come up with something amazing in a matter of minutes, right? So I wonder if that fits this kind of schedule that you were describing. I mean, obviously it does because you mentioned some 3D stuff that you were doing, right?
Yeah. And I think it all depends on the task that you're working on, right? If so, so if I'm doing a lot of interior, like for example, a piece like the one I have in here, the 3D is very simple. It's the table, it's the walls, and I think that was it. The table and the walls, just to get the right angle to describe the shot. That's it, and then I just painted on top.
And you completed with the details. Okay.
Except, yeah, but then let me then I'll work on my own things. This is almost all 3D, right? The building, this, the tanks, except the people and the explosion and the trees. The rest is 3D. Um, an image like this, these things is 3D, and then just photo bashing on top of it. So I think, I mean, this is 90% 3D, and then it's literally just putting a little bit of foliage on top and some characters. So I think the goal needs to be, what am I trying to visualize? How do I get there the fastest? Is it 3D? Is it photo? Is it sketching? Sometimes just sketches work really, really well to describe certain things, right? But I never want it to be that the 3D dictates what the visuals are. I don't want to be tied. Does that make sense? For example, if I'm not really good at ZBrush and I need to make a creature and I only know how to do it this and this way, so the creature I'm going to present is that, then I'm letting the 3D or the software dictate where I end up. And I don't think that should be the case. I think always should be your end goal is what matters, and then how you get there becomes secondary. And let the tool follow the end result versus have the end result follow what the limitations of the tool.
Yeah,
yeah, I was just commenting on this with Dom like before our talk. Like, I think it goes for any kind of tool, right? Not only 3D, because some people use like photo bash and then let the photos dictate the design, and then some other like it works for everything. That's why some people think it's a cheat to use some tools, because I think like they rely too much of the design on the tool. But if you're designing and then like boosting your design with your like the tools that you know, I think it's a completely different thing, and it shows in the result, you know.
Yeah, and learning how to design is a much longer pursuit than learning the tool, even technical tool, right? To become a really good designer, I haven't gotten there yet. To become a really good designer, I think it's a long pursuit. Learning the tools, people can become really good and efficient in tools fairly quickly. so the tool should just be a tool to visualize what you're trying to design, whether the design is a keyframe or an environment or a character or a vehicle. Learning to design well is a much harder thing and a much longer pursuit than learning the tool. But the tool is extremely important too. And I highly, highly regard people that are really, really talented in the craftsmanship. I have a good friend who I went to design school with. He's an industrial designer, but also an illustrator. Doesn't work in the concept art field. He has done some, but he's a fantastic designer, but extremely, extremely good at sketching. His name is Spencer Nugent. If you sketch a day,
yeah.
His understanding of the tool and technical ability is among the best in the world. It really is so good. And I have a reverence and a respect for somebody that knows a craft so well. I'm sure you guys are familiar with Fran, Dibujante Nocturno.
Yeah. I met him in Madrid a few years ago.
So prolific.
Prolific, such a kind guy. Extreme, like he's a phenomenal designer, but he's also phenomenal craft, like his craftsmanship and his understanding of the tool and how to do it is among the best in the world, for sure. I mean, I put Dibujante Nocturno among the maybe top 5 best sketching drawing people in the world, right? I put Spencer Nugent among the best, even though he doesn't do concept art per se, but just of drawing and visualizing things quickly, among the best in the world. And there's something to be said about that. Obviously, for me, the top of the mountain when it comes to purely drawing is the Korean guy.
Kim Jung-gi?
Kim. He's on another level, right? A savant. And he's a good designer too. But his craftsmanship is to die for. So I'm not trying to talk down the skill set. Skill set is hugely important, and I have a high respect for it. But I think learning to become a good designer is a tougher pursuit than to become highly good at a tool.
Yeah, it's something that I realized, after pursuing this, honing the skills of the fundamentals and the technical stuff that you go into at the beginning, the way you go after brush packs and, oh my God, I need that brush, to be as good. And then only to realize, like, I don't want to come out as arrogant or anything, but I think I've gotten to a point where I'm quite better now than I was years ago, in terms of color, composition, and all that stuff. But then design is something that I've always felt so weak at, like...
Same.
At least I'm starting to kind of understand it a little better, let alone doing that, right? It's kind of something that you always see other people doing way better, right? It's like you're never getting to their level. It's so hard, man. And whenever you see someone succeeding at their design, you go like, how do they find out? How do they figure that out? It's so beautiful. It's just perfect, It's such a feeling, man.
and it's also tricky because it's also we all have different flavors too, right?
Yeah.
So I think there is universally good designs that we all agree on. That, for example, I think everybody can look at a tiger and say, what a beautiful animal. We all can agree that a tiger is beautiful. But some of us like Porsches, and some of us like BMWs, and some of us like Teslas. And I can't say, well, Andres' taste isn't as refined as mine because he likes Teslas while I like BMWs. And Dom, he is out of this world because he likes these Ferraris, and Ferraris is just right? So there is something to our own in unique flavors, and that's fine. But there are also some things that are undeniably beautiful. But we'll always find an exception to the rule too of that, right? I think we all can look at certain things in nature and think they're beautiful, and somebody will say, no, that is not beautiful for me. So how do we get there, and how do we know, and so forth? I don't have an answer to it. I'm just trying to constantly learn and look and see and try to understand and break down. And why do I think this is beautiful? What about it? What are the patterns? What are the lines? What are the proportions? Why do I feel that a Volkswagen bubble car, whatever those are called, is an iconic design, even though I don't want to drive that car? Well, if I break that down and I start making circles around it, the proportions of where those circles intersect with each other is so very well balanced from all angles. And those Germans really knew how to do that Volkswagen bubble car, right? That's why that car has been around for so many years, and that design hasn't changed. Even though it's not my flavor, I don't want to drive that car, but I can't not say that it's not good looking. So yeah.
Yeah, look, there's something I was wondering when I saw you showing this legacy project, right? So this is your personal project, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so when you come up with these images, with these designs, with this story, to what point do you let your learned structure from your experience in the industry spill onto this new project? Your workflow, the way you do stuff, right? The way you come up with ideas, the way you schedule things. I'm just curious because I feel like I've been not stuck, but quite comfortable in a too chaotic structure, if you can call that, chaotic and structure shouldn't go together. But anyway, so I was kind of looking to know more about ways to do stuff. I know each project is unique, especially if it's a personal project, it's in the name personal, but I was wondering if you use any of that experience in terms of not like the technical knowledge about painting and 3D and stuff, but the way you put stuff, like the steps you follow, what I mean, right? I'm kind of lost now with the explanation.
I think I understand what you mean. So and first of all, I'm by no means an expert at it, and I think of people like Dom or people, and there are a few people that have been really prolific with their own things that put that out, that probably have a much better way of me doing it. But what I have done is just a list, and I actually don't want to show you the list because it has too many notes and so forth that I'm not ready to show publicly yet. But I broke it down to a list of what are all the things that need to be designed, what are all the story points, and then knowing that I want the story to be X amount of pages. I know that for each page I will need this. And I just broke it down and started to craft it away as if it was a regular job. Even though a regular job, I might just be in 2 months, and this is a 2-year pursuit, right? So, and you start breaking it off. And guys, by the way, when I'm wiping my nose, I'm sorry, I caught a cold, and I didn't want to cancel on you guys. So,
dude, it's okay.
Grotesque.
No worries.
You need to stop like saying sorry, man. Like, we don't care about basically anything. We're just grateful that you were here.
Constantly apologizing.
Yeah, that just so why is he wiping that big nose all the time? Just keep it in. Anyway, when you have a nose like mine, you fit a lot of junk in there, So
I get you.
It's because we talk about deep stuff, personal stuff. We get emotional, so yeah, it's understandable.
Yeah. Anyway, so I tried to break it down and treat it as a job, but yeah, I think quite a bit of that spills over, but I also try to find opportunities to learn and do things that I haven't done before, and and finding my own voice. And I'm still trying to figure that out. What is my own voice? I feel that one of my big problems is that I'm so vanilla. I can't think. I can't look at my things and say, well, he is a X kind of guy. He's a robot guy. He's a this guy. He's a that guy. I'm so vanilla. And when I look, even when I look at my work from an overall view, just looking, I'm a little bit all over the place. And that could be good and that could be bad. But I think work-wise, it's been really good because people keep coming back to me and say, you're versatile. Could you also do this? Could you also do this? So that has been good. But I also sometimes always admire people like Neville Page. That is the creature guy. I know he can design spacesuits and helmets and probably environments and so forth too.
Yeah.
But he's so specialized in what he does, and he's the best. That Aaron Beck is so good at his near future robotics, right?
Mm-hmm.
So good at it, and he's the guy, right? And I look at my things and I feel that I'm so vanilla, that I'm all over the place, but I'm not great at anything. So what is my voice? And I'm working on another personal project right now that I'm not ready to set out yet, but where I have gone down, where I try to just strip down all the restrictions and trying to go back to what is it that really made me love art in the beginning. And it was street art, it was abstract art, it was robots, it was a lot of graffiti, it was fashion. I loved fashion as a kid. It was traveling. What happens when I take all of those things, shake in a jar, and spit it out? What comes out of that? When there are no inhibitions. And go back to that. Not thinking, what will a client feel? What will a producer feel? What will a director feel? But just, who am I when nobody's looking? And then put that out. And I still haven't found that voice yet, but I'm working on that. And eventually, when I feel that it's good enough, I'll put it out in the world. But I'm doing it more for me than per se for someone else. Sorry, I got off track, Adrian, with your question.
No worries, man. No worries.
And as you guys have seen, I have a tendency to start one place, go like, because my mind is like.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
Very relatable.
So yes. So I try to apply what I've learned from the industry into my own projects. I try to be strategic. I try to have a list and just take it off one by one, and eventually I hope to have my book that I put out. I actually have talked with a producer that was really interested in the Legacy project because it has so much politics involved. It's basically a retelling of the military coup that happened in Chile in the 1970s, and that made my parents escape. But I'm retelling it in a future setting. But the same things that happened, and the same things that happened to my parents, retelling them in a more interesting environment, with a touch of sci-fi and dystopian elements. Why? Because I want my children and my grandchildren and their children and so forth never to forget the atrocities that happened during a fascist military regime, so that we don't repeat those things in the future.
I would definitely buy the book.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I'll print two of them. One for you and one for me.
Yo, what's up with that? What about me and Adrian?
We can't have
I'll print it for you.
We will only get PDFs, Adrian. We're screwed.
Yeah, we got the
No,
digital version.
obviously, I want to eventually, I want to print it, and eventually I would love to sell it off and see what happens. But yeah, I think those things can happen, and I know Hollywood is always searching for stories and so forth, and it's a matter of having some luck and have things align and have the right eyeballs see you at the right time and so forth, and that's you never know how that happens. That's actually how I even started working in the Art Directors Guild. The right eyeball saw the right things at the right time, and I was invited in. So
Awesome.
yeah.
That's a quite noble and genuine like way to express something, of your own, like your personal experiences, something that affects you, something that is you, something that has to do with you somehow. It's exactly what we were talking about earlier, about reflecting your inner self through your work somehow, I can't think of the right words to express this, but you know what I mean, right?
Yep.
To be your own like individual person outside of like the commercial stuff too.
Yeah, and no matter how unique you think that is, which is still valid, yes, is unique, but you will also always find other people who can relate to that, and that's the beautiful part of this, right? Where you can connect with some others who are like, yeah, that's it, same here, I relate to that, I feel like that, I identify myself as what you represent there. It's
and even when we can't identify the emotions or the even so
there's always something.
Yes, or it invokes something in us, even if it's not my story, right? So when I was a kid, when we were recent immigrants in Sweden, my grandfather didn't speak English, but he loved movies, and he had these black and white movies, and that's how he learned English. He also escaped to Sweden, and he, as when I was 4 years old, showed me Star Wars. My mom didn't let me see Star Wars because she thought it was too violent, and she had just escaped Chile, and she had seen people be assassinated in the streets, and anything that had to do with violence, she didn't want me to see. So I had to sneak away and watch Star Wars with him, and we had no idea what they were saying. It was all English. I didn't know how to read the subtitles, but I fell in love with that story. He showed me King Kong, and I fell in love with cinema. And he told me about this place called Hollywood, and that's where they made movies. And I remember first time visiting the U.S., I saw him after that, and I told him, "Hey, I visited Hollywood," and it wasn't that cool of a place, but I didn't tell him that. And it was beautiful to tell him that I had once visited the place that we, as when I was little, had seen so many movies come out of that, right? And now he's dead, and now I'm able to work in this industry. But when I was a kid, he evoked this feeling of films in me because we could see and feel stories that weren't our story, but somehow relate or at least feel the passion and the anger and the sadness of other people. And as a kid, I saw the movie Mississippi Burns or Mississippi Burning. I don't know what the real name of it is. Mississippi Burns or Mississippi Burning, something like that. Let me look it up now because I'm an idiot. Mississippi... Mississippi... I can't even spell Mississippi Burning. Burning. That is what it is. Mississippi Burning. This movie came out... when did it come out? I can't remember. 88. All right. So I was like 7 years old. 6, 7 years old when this movie came out. And it was about African Americans being treated really, really poorly in this country. Ku Klux Klan, and I don't even remember exactly all the things that happened, but treated awfully. I had never lived that experience, but as a kid, I was just crying seeing this, and I thought it was so awful. And it evoked these feelings in me that were really bothersome. And I carried this film with me. I was probably too young to see this film. But there was one sequence there of a child crying because they're killing or hurting his father. And it just bothered me so much. And again, it was not my story. But it was told in such a way that me as a little kid could be affected. by the visuals, by the story, by the music, by the mood, by the acting, and and carry that with me throughout my life. Of like, hey, racial inequality is not okay, right? And what other inequalities are not okay, and be a defender of that, and so forth. So this is a long, convoluted way of saying even other people's stories can affect us and touch us to the core, as I felt this movie has done. And I haven't re-seen it. I need to do it. I'm going to download it and see it soon. But that even other people's stories can affect us and cause us to change or to want to do something.
Yeah, to be honest, I think like that it's not that they can do it. I think it's the best way to move people, right? I mean,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because you're looking for that emotional connection, right?
Yeah.
A way to get to you somehow. You know,
Yeah.
pull that string.
Yeah.
That string that connects us.
Yeah. And obviously not everything has to be emotional. I mean, I'm all for watching Transformers and just enjoy the fun of it and see the cling, 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 and be okay with that it's not a heavy story or a Pacific Rim or whatever. You know, that's okay too. But there's some... but the ones that stays with me the longest are obviously the ones that in one way or another connect with me emotionally.
Yeah.
And if they can do both, like I haven't seen Dune yet, but I think that movie can do a little bit of both. It has the amazing visuals, right? But I love the story of Dune, so I'm super excited to go and see it now within the next few days. But when a story can do both of those, even better.
Absolutely.
yeah, I guess that's where like Star Wars laid for me, you know, like whoa, spaceship, shiny, and then like also a cool story behind it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lord of the
Interesting
Rings,
how...
same, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually a repetition of the same, what do they call that, like tropes or archetype, I think, which is, you know, I found this when I watched Star Wars, like the whole 6 movies, you know, before these last 3 came out. I watched them like through the week, and then I started to kind of learn more about, you know, looking up documentaries about how they made it, you know, George Lucas talking about how he came up with all that stuff. And I found this book called The Hero's Journey. The Hero with 1,000 Faces, which is like the representation of the hero's journey, you know, written by now I you know, I don't remember the name exactly. But yeah, it's like an encyclopedia, like a collection of what every single story in the world has in common, you know, both found in myth, in religion, in tales, in anything, even like our own lives. And yeah, I then realized, you know, I started to get more critical about every single movie that I was watching, everything. And I would try to pick up the patterns that they all seem to follow, right? Now, of course, I'm not talking about the way you should write your story, right? That's like up to every single individual. But I'm just saying that by, you know, reading that book was kind of interesting to realize that there's such a pattern happening. And the way you, like what you said about Transformers, for instance, Joseph Campbell is the name of the author of the book, by the way.
Yes.
So for instance, to me, yeah, like Transformers is like, you know, shiny things around, like Andres said, but I was able to kind of, I seem to be interested now, at least I'm more interested in the story behind, you know, not in that movie in particular, but for instance, I can pick up instantly like the link of this particular archetype that I like a lot, which is tiny character, bigger character. You know, they both have like their ups and downs, their pros and cons, but it's that bond, that kind of inspires me a lot. And yeah, I got to live that. I mean, you just see him. Well, he's waiting for me back there, but this guy is my project. This bond that I get to experience with him inspired and sparked a lot more things that were dormant inside of me, for a long time. And now it's starting to come together. And I'm finding out ways to make everything connect now. Like all these paintings that you may see some paintings on the wall back there, but it's like the entire room is decorated with those paintings that apparently they had nothing to do with each other a few years ago. And now it's like, they were just like little trailers. In my mind, it was like all random, but now it's like it has a purpose, right? Yeah. And you start to kind of follow a direction because you have a meaningful kind of goal now. You just found your path. And I find that inspiring and beautiful and motivating, and it's what fuels me, every single day since time flies. It's been 3 years already since I had the idea. Yeah, it's like that moment, that sparks the entire thing. It's incredible how something as simple as one sketch can fire up an entire universe.
For sure.
Sorry for the long rant.
No. It's that makes the how do you say it in English?
The cherry on top.
No. It's there's a Swedish expression that says "paletten få paletten att ramla," which means basically the coin that finally falls into the slot machine that makes it happen.
Yes, yeah, exactly. The puzzle piece that falls into place, I guess.
Exactly,
I don't know.
Exactly. I don't know what the expression is in English, but
yeah. But we get it. Exactly.
The plug in the wheel that makes the whole engine start.
You nailed it.
I think it is.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So by seeing other people, because it's kind of interesting, because when I first found out about concept art, and I just realized that, oh my God, there's an entire industry, about this thing that I love doing so much. There's a real like a real life application, an entire market of this. I can work as this, then I realized how everybody else seemed to be working on their own personal projects. They were coming up with books and universes and their own websites, and they were, I tried to do my own, but I forced it, and it doesn't come out, when you do that. So I said, okay, no problem. And a few years later, it just comes to you, apparently. It's like, I don't know I don't have a guidebook for anyone looking for that kind of stuff. Like, how do I come up with my own, I don't know. It kind of finds you in a way, it's like whenever you're ready. And guess what? Absolutely. You're never ready because you're always scared of getting started. And, so yeah, I guess it's a matter of alignment with yourself and who you are and your values and your identity, I guess.
Yeah.
It's about finding your voice, finding yourself, and letting that voice speak out loud, which is something that I didn't do for the first 2 years of my project because I was too scared of, like, I'm not sure if they're gonna like it. Maybe somebody's gonna say something awful about it, and I'm gonna be hurt, and I'm gonna be like, oh man, they don't like it.
Yeah, and we all feel that, or why is it nobody seeing it, or so forth, right? Absolutely. And I still worry about that. Like, what if people don't like? I worry about that less, to be honest. My worry many times is like, not so much if people will like it, but if, like, what if other people even don't care, which shouldn't be a worry either, because I don't do it for them. But speaking about that, though,
I'm glad that you said that, by the way. You don't do it for them. You do it for yourself. You do it because it's what you have inside. If someone else likes what I'm doing, then that's a bonus to me.
Yeah.
The first battle is already like a big success for me, which is to be able to make it happen for myself, to get this thing out there.
Absolutely. I agree. But I also think it's important to learn to how do I make myself valuable for an employer. So
to find your audience.
To find not even my audience, to find I think one of the struggles that a lot of concept artists have had, will keep having, and are having, is there are a lot of really skilled people that don't have enough billable hours. And I think most concept artists struggle with that. I could work more. Why are people not finding me? And so forth. But we also want to do our own thing. And those two things sometimes are battling each other. I want to be an artist and express myself and do the things I want, which is admirable and good pursuit. At the same time, I have rent to pay, I have kids to pay for, I have food in the table, I have a car payment, whatever it is that you need to pay for. You need to live. And I have a family that thinks I'm crazy, that said I should never pursue this, and now it's not going well. Whatever your story is, right? I had that. The reason why I wanted to be a professor is because my mom said, well, it's good that you draw, and it's good that all this graffiti stuff and whatever, but you need to get a real job eventually, right? So you have that fear of paying bills, being a normal, functional part of society, citizen in society, where so that I'm not a burden on society, yet being self-fulfilled. And how do these two worlds live in the same space, and I can be fully fulfilled yet? So, and I think it's a struggle for everybody. So I think it's good to sometimes push yourself. Okay, A, I want to be marketable, but B, I also want to do my own things. And how can I do both? And so what I started doing when I was really early when I made the switch 2016, is I looked at portfolios that I wanted to emulate. I looked at web pages, and I saw people have project-based web pages, but I also saw web pages that were just, here's my portfolio, and they have their 15, 20 best things, and a little bit about them. And they got jobs, but there were others that had, here's the sci-fi project I did, and here's this movie I did, and here's this game I did. And I felt, I want to try to do that. So I started to give myself my own mini projects that weren't necessarily an own IP, but hey, I have nothing about sci-fi in my portfolio. Can I do 3, 4, 5 paintings that seem to be in the same world that people can say, okay, he understands how to do this. Now I've done that. Can I do 3, 4 paintings that are in the fantasy realm? Now can I do something that is historically accurate? Now can I do something? And you create these small little themes that are almost like mini projects that aren't necessarily a full-blown IP, but I think it's a really good exercise for yourself. I do that still. I look at what I have now, and I have way too little fantasy. So I need to do something that is... And I have only done 2 fantasy projects professionally. None of them have come out yet. Both film projects. And I can't say what they are, but they haven't come out. Well, one is Viking fantasy, and one is medieval fantasy. Until they're out, I can't show any of it. So I need to have some of that in my portfolio if I want to work with that. If I don't want to work with it, don't put it up, because I don't want a producer to find my things and say, hey, he could do this, right? But if I want to work with that, make myself a little project that has to do with that. 3, 4 paintings. It doesn't need to be more than that, but that it seems like it lives in the same world. And I think concept artists should do that as well. Work on their big IPs, yes. But if they feel that they have some weaknesses, I believe in a T personality. That you're really deep in something, but you're also a little bit broad. I'm really good at robots. But maybe there isn't enough robot work to keep myself busy. So I can do some robots, but I'm also good at this and this. And you know what? Related to robots are vehicles. And related to vehicles are these armors, right? So I have some of that too. And I'm probably going to get work for robots, but maybe by them seeing these other things that I am good at, I can also get some work on that and some work on that. And that's how I have received most of my jobs, is that, hey, do you also do this? Yeah, I actually do. Look at this. Or I saw on your webpage that you did this. Do you think can help us? I had one image on Instagram of a collapsed building that was destroyed, that led to a show that was post-apocalyptic, that led to another show that was post-up. And I did like 2 or 3 of them in a row, and I was like, I can do other stuff too, you know. Still haven't put them up except the La Brea, because the La Brea is the only one that... But what I mean is, sometimes by showing one thing leads you to something, and it's good to show themes that you can do so that people see that.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was such a convoluted way
No.
of
Listen, that was a great analogy. I love the tea thing that you did. Yes,
Yeah.
I agree.
show depth,
Mm-hmm.
but also show some breadth.
Yeah.
Unless you only want to work with the depth thing, and that's
Yeah.
okay too. For example, Andre, I know you're excellent at vehicles, and that's great. It's a gutsy thing to do. I wouldn't do that. Why?
I wouldn't put excellent over there, but thank you.
You're excellent at it. And you do it a lot. I wouldn't do that because I don't have the guts to feel, is there enough work for me to come just with this? But for some there is, right? And that's good. But then we go back to tie it full circle, to go back to what I was saying before. I struggle with the feeling too vanilla. Like, what is he really?
Mhm.
I don't know how to strike that balance yet, and I hope I can get there. But I think you guys are way more ahead of me in that field of having your niches. Adrian, I know you do a lot of fantasy, right? And you're really
Yeah.
good at it, and all aspects of it, both the keyframes and the environments and the characters, and fantasy is your realm. Andre, you do a lot of the vehicles and the robotics and the mechanical stuff, and that's your realm. And Dom, your watercolor-esque thing that is, you're like, I can tell a painting of yours from far, right? It's so clear that this is a Dom painting, and you're so prolific in it. And you guys,
That's what I feel like.
oh, you are, no, you're fantastic at it, and that's gutsy and it's good. And I wish, and I think because you guys are good at it, you have found your audiences. I mean, you have a lot of people following you guys and so forth. I don't think I have an audience because I don't have that voice yet. I'm a little bit all over the board, and so that's one of my struggles of like finding what is my real voice. My voice is just doing things that look semi-realistic, and I like to play a lot with lights because so much of movies and TVs is how you light issues. How you light things, but not in the sense Dom lights it, because Dom is so, I would say I don't want to say flamboyant, but there's something so
Dreamy.
strong. There's something so like, it's almost vision-esque in your paintings, right? And which it's beautiful.
I appreciate it.
So that's not the type of lighting I do. I wish I could do it, but it's not the type of lighting I do. It's my lighting is just trying to think of the mood and the feel of what is telling a cinematic story. But I haven't found my voice, and I'm looking for that, and that's one of my struggles, and I'll get there eventually, I hope.
That's okay. I guess
Yeah.
you just gotta keep walking, you know.
Takes time, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely, and but at the same time, if clients and producers keep coming back, that's okay. I mean, I as I said, these last 3 years, my first 2 years as a concept artist were a struggle. My first year was a struggle. Then it got better, and then I started to do some film pitch stuff, and then eventually, when I was invited into the union, since then it has been really good. So, yeah. But
I
it's
was just
okay.
going to ask you
I'm-
about that, about the union thing. Like, does it have to do with the Art Directors Guild, or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry. Ugh!
It's okay, man.
Again, big nose, lots of stuff in there. Yes. so here in the US, to work in film projects or TV projects, you have to be in the union. Or almost all film and TV projects are done within union. There are some independent stuff that are done outside of union. So you have to be in the union to work on them, or you can work on them through a special effects house. Like if you work at ILM, you're not a union member by working at ILM or MPC. If you work at MPC, you are not necessarily a union member, or a Fuse FX or a ILM or Framestore. But those special effects houses are they're never part of the art department. So if you want to be part of the art department, you need to be in the union. But other ways of working on film projects, if you get to work on pitch projects, that's basically when a director reaches out to you and say, hey, I'm pitching this film or I'm pitching this TV show for this studio and I need concept art for it. And I did a few of those before I joined the union. But if you want to be in the production and in the pre-production and post-production, you need to be part of the union. And it's a small group, actually.
You get like an invitation from someone in the union, or I don't know, because the way I see it's like a big or rather small family of members, that get to work on like projects and stuff.
I think there's about in the roster. I think there's about 250 concept artists in the union.
Okay.
I don't think all of them are working. I know all of them are not working. So my guess is that about half of them are working or so. So it's a small group. It's not too many. Many of them you don't see online at all. There are some so talented artists that have no online presence. They have no interest of having an online presence. They're not on ArtStation. They're not on Instagram, and they kick ass.
Yeah,
because that's not why they're doing it. They're not doing it for the followers. And I met a few of those that are just, who are you? I've never seen you, and you're like so good. But they have worked on long lists of people, and long lists of films and projects.
They just don't need to post themselves out there because they already got like lots of jobs.
Yeah, exactly. and they don't have the interest of it. That's not why they're doing it.
They don't need to. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, most of us do. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. A lot of us do it also to feel like that reward, from seeing how many people like my posts and stuff. But a lot of us do it mostly for the exposure kind of stuff. To put myself out there, to be noticed by other people in the industry, to get job opportunities, and to make my name like a place in the industry, right?
Absolutely, and I think that's important. That's important, and it's a thing. Again, it's something I've been awful at networking through social media and so forth. But I do think it's important.
It's a second job, bro.
It is, and as I said, I've been lucky enough that work keeps coming in and has kept coming in. So it has been less urgent. But I don't want it to be that way. I don't want it to be that I only post once I have a day off. I want it to be that I know at Mondays evening, that's what I do. I spend 3 hours on updating things, posting things. I just haven't done it. It's just a little bit here and a little bit there. But yeah, so if you want to work in the union, it's basically, there's 3 ways in. And I don't know how it is when people are from the outside of the country, because I know people outside of the US work in films and so forth. So I think the rules are a little bit different. But to work in the union or be invited into Art Directors Guild, as I said, I think it's 200 to 300 people.
But you have to live there, right? Or not?
In LA?
Yeah.
I don't live in LA. I actually live an hour and a half north of LA. And I know some people live in San Francisco, and I think some people even live further away. But I think, per usual, you have to live here. But I know people don't, because it is an LA union. But the way, so if you work on an independent film that becomes unionized, like let's say there's independent filmmakers that Warner Brothers buy it, and you have been working on that film, That's called that it's grandfathered in, and you can become a member of the union by that. Rarely happens. And the second way is if you're off roster. So basically, if there's a film and everybody's busy, every concept artist in the roster is busy, they can say, hey, we have called everybody in the roster, in the union roster, nobody can, so we need to go outside. And if you do that, and if you can log in 30 days like that in a year, you can qualify to present yourself for the union and say, hey, I was working off roster 30 days. Really hard. I tried. I got in 6 days off roster my year before the union. So
That's
it's hard,
an
but it's
interesting
possible.
tracking system right there.
Yeah. It's hard. But the most common way is basically by invitation. And it has to be a producer or a director that puts your name in front of the union and say, hey, this guy needs to be part of our union, and they have to have a good reason for it.
Okay.
And that's how I was invited. Yeah. And it's often, I think each show or each TV show or each film can do it max once a day. One person per production at a max. And you have to give a good case for why. So let's say the movie Venom 2 have a bunch of concept artists, but one of them says, hey, my buddy blah 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 is really good at this. Could we bring him in? Then the production designer will go to the producer or the director and say, hey, I want you to put this guy's name in front of the union and try to bring him in. Can you do that? And they have to look at their personal stuff and say, nah, anybody can do
dude,
this. Right?
I imagine them like some sort of like dark room and like with top
that too.
lights
I wasn't
sitting
in that
there,
room.
like
No.
pushing the new guy in front of to be evaluated.
Well, you do get evaluated, but you're never in that room. Like I never met this council at all.
Yeah. Okay.
I just know that the producer that put my name in front, and that
Now I
process
imagine
took
them like the Jedi Council.
Exactly. No, exactly. But anyway, that's how it grows.
Yeah.
But it grows really slow, and the reason why they do it really slow is because there's not enough work for everybody that wants to work in movies to do it. So they have to be. I think they have to be careful not to oversaturate the market. So yeah. So that's
some really insightful information, man. Like it's all these rules and the strict methods of like measuring those, if you're worth it or not.
And I mean, and there's so many that are so much better that could be in the union and so forth. It just sometimes it's like
the connections,
lucky draw,
right?
The connections. Exactly. In my case, there was a production. I was teaching a sketching class. So when I was a product designer, I was teaching. I put out this book like, when was this? 2013. So 8 years ago. This is a product sketches book. I don't think they sell it anymore. But it's just a bunch of sketch work from products. Okay. Cars, bags, whatever, shoes. Put this out, and they brought in a bunch of freelance work. And when I put that out, there were some people that asked if Mold 3D Studio asked if I wanted to teach a class, and I said sure. And one of my students was a production designer that just wanted to improve her drawing skills. And I told her, oh, wow, your job is like what I dreamed. My dream is to one day work in that. And she jokingly, I thought, said, one day I'll get you into the union. And a year later, a few months later, she had a small job for me that was non-union. And then a year later, another small job for me. And then 2 years later, and we kept in touch. And she's now one of my best friends. Yeah, her and her husband, great people. But she called me in and said, hey, and throughout, I kept working on my skills. And then she said, I have a gig, and I've shown them your work, and they think you're perfect for this, and this could get you into the union. And that's how it happened for me. So just just being nice and trying to be as good of a teacher as I could for that class, and then we stayed in touch. So I think networking and being humble and being kind, as in any field, is always the key.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, and I'm happy that it happened that way for you. You know, that's how it should always be. Like, you keep doing your thing, you keep improving yourself, and ultimately everything, like we said earlier, seems to fall into place. You know, so
but again, as we said in the beginning, there's so many roads that lead to Rome, right? And right now, I just shared the happy story. I haven't shared how many times I sent it to a game studio, like, I want to work here, and nothing. How many emails were sent out with rejection after rejection after rejection, right? So those exist too. We all have them.
We have to be aware of that side of the story as well. It always happens.
But this is the internet.
Yeah,
we put the highlights out.
We only
and
show
we
the
hide
highlights.
the dark side, so everybody compares themselves to our highlights reel.
It's the tip of the iceberg. That's what you can see.
I only share when I ran a double marathon. I don't share when I was crying because of the pain and I'm weak, right? Because that's not so glamorous, right? I don't
exactly
all the unglamorous emails of you suck, man. Go back to the drawing table. I don't share the many rejections, but they're there too, and for sure.
It's interesting how you never know about those things unless you try it yourself, you know.
Yeah.
And then it kind of clicks for you. It's like, oh, of course, it can't be always, rainbows and sunshine and
no. And I feel my story has so many more failures than successes. Keeps having more failures than successes, but that's okay too.
It's part of the story, an important part of it. It's like the basic pillar of it. You know, all that practice, all those failures, all those defeats, and
even absolutely, and even now, I mean, I've had failures within the unit. I'm gonna work on this film. I'm gonna work. No, they thought you were not good enough. And that happens too. And I'm not good enough because they picked that person, and that person is better. That keeps happening. So we I think, but it's important to stay hungry and stay fresh and think, what is it that I need to improve on, and how can I improve on? But also to take risk. I'm not good at this, but I'm gonna pretend as I am and fake it until I make it, and maybe that works, maybe it doesn't. I don't know.
Yeah.
Is there one quick piece of advice you want to give to like a younger person starting out?
Yes. Obviously, we have heard this so many times. Fundamentals, it's good. Fundamentals is great. Next, working on fundamentals, but next, as I mentioned a little bit before, work project-based. When I've talked to people, so I've had a few reach out to me and say, hey, I really want to work in the movie industry, and people that are really talented, and much better than me, but it's so hard for me. It seems so difficult. It seems like such a little bubble. And I said, yes, it is. What do you recommend? And my recommendation is often to build your portfolio, as I said, theme-based. Treat your portfolio as if you're already in the film industry, if that's what you want to do. I don't know about the game industry since, but even the game industry, game X, game Y, game Z, right? And show them that here's this project about zombies. Here's this project about Stone Age. Here's this spy project, right? And show that, hey, this person can tell stories here. They can design things around this. They can design things around this. And if you have 4 or 5 of those, you don't need that many. You need 4 or 5 of those to show that they can design for different aspects. And then you make a new one, and it's much better than this first one. Kick that one out and let go of that. I need to do that myself on my webpage. Like, I know these things in the back here. I need to kick these out. I will do it right after this podcast. I'm removing these because they're not worth it anymore. Or they're not, I have better things that shows the same, right? And always a new thing comes better, put it out. And many people do that just with one image, and that's fine too. If you have 15, 20 images and then kick out the worst one and put a better one and so forth. But I like to treat the portfolio more theme-based, that I have a theme and I have 3, 4, 5 that are related to this theme, and be as diverse as you can within them. The establishing shot, the interior shot, the keyframe shot, the pure design breakaway shot that shows that. And if you can show that, to show that I understand how to work macro, I have how to work micro in these different settings, I think it's good. I also think it's important to have a few things that you focus on right now, especially because the tools are becoming so good. And I'll just do Blender and the light in Blender and so forth, and it's great, and you do phenomenal results. But and because you have learned to do dilapidated buildings with foliage on top of them, great. What happens when somebody comes in into you and say, "Hey, I need you to do a futuristic setting, 2 people falling out of a building, and they're shooting up towards the building as they're falling. Go." I'm not good at that, but I'm really good at destroyed buildings with foliage on them, right? Like, push yourself outside your comfort zone too. And don't only... So, and again, it goes back to don't let the tool narrate the result. Think of the result and then what are the tools I need to get to that? Because otherwise I think we become
dependent
handcuffed
on the tools. Yeah.
Dependent to certain tools. Even if we become really fast at that, that's great. But can you do X, Y, and Z? And if you do, what are the methods I need to get a result in that and yield a method fairly fast? That's my advice.
Oh yeah, thank you
That's
so much
great
for
advice.
all these insights. Really appreciate it. So we're coming up on 2 hours now, almost
Really?
2 hours and 30.
Yeah.
I told you, man.
I'm sorry, guys.
Well,
It was
Yeah,
gonna go
this-
really fast.
But we'd love to have you on like some other time too. You
Sure,
have a lot
sure.
to share.
Yeah, no, I don't know about that. Everything I said, take it with a grain of salt. If it doesn't apply to whoever is listening to this, if it doesn't apply to you, flush it away. It's just my opinion, right? And if it applies to you, fantastic. But thank you guys. This has been really, really fun. And again, I appreciate it. And you guys are awesome at what you do. And I have a lot to learn from you. So we will. Happy to do this again in the future.
You as well. Yeah, we'll drop your links down in the description below. Link to
Not my
your art
first issue
studio.
because it's so behind. Put it just my webpage. That's better.
Okay.
That's behind. So
Thank you so
that's-
much for taking the time and coming by, man. We
Yeah.
really
Appreciate
appreciate it.
Likewise, and I hope to see you guys in person one day.
Definitely.
Whenever, if there's a light box this year, I hope it's in person. And
That would be
and-
awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it, and see you guys around.
We'll see you guys
Sure.
on the next podcast.
Okay. Cheers.
Cheers.
And